This is What If I Told You, the event psychology video podcast for event professionals, in which Victoria Mady, event consultant and host, talks with the world's top minds in behavioral science, neuroscience, and psychology on how to transform events using insights about human behavior and mind.
Hello, I'm Victoria Mady, and this is What If I Told You, the event psychology podcast, where I talk all things event psychology, that is how to apply behavioral science and psychology, brain science insights in events. And today, my guest is Kamila Zahradnickova, and Kamila is a behavioral designer. She applies behavioral science to marketing and business. And she solves customer-related questions by leveraging research on perception, motivation, and decision-making. And these days, she mainly builds communication strategies and conducts user research for startups. Welcome, Kamila.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
Thank you for coming to this show. I'm so excited to talk with you about all things behavioral science. Let's jump into it, right? Because my focus is on both events and behavioral science and psychology. My first questions, would be just about both. What can you tell me? What is the most weird or maybe funny event experience that happened to you?
Yeah, so I find it quite bizarre that way too often my name tag gets somewhat distracted by the length of my surname. And mostly the system and the graphic designers are not ready to write out Zahradnickova on the one line. So I have this collection of name tags that either misspelled my name or just cut some letters.
Right. I guess it's an interesting collection, right, that you have.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I guess you're attending a lot of events, both live and maybe more online these days, right? So what is the first thing that you do when attending an event?
So in person, that is, I always try to scan the room and try to find the ideal place to sit, because I really want to sit next to someone whom I might invite to a conversation, or someone that looks as if we are doing maybe the same thing, that we are interested in the same stuff. And so in principle, I'm scanning the room and searching for the visual cues that I have to determine where should I sit, because that's so important for the experience.
Right, absolutely. Wow, that's interesting. That's one behavioral science insight number one for you today.
And then I also use these cues, and I look for the ideal place without noticing most often.
Right, absolutely. What is one thing that you hate about event experience?
Information retention and my poor memory. So I would say from the event management perspective, that would be some follow-up activities, because I find it so appalling that a week after an event, I can't really remember all the things that I would want to remember.
Right.
And it's so frustrating.
Absolutely.
Because I spend so much time and energy just trying to soak it up and memorize as many things as I would want to, but then a week later I'm sitting there and trying to remember who was the speaker again.
Exactly. So I guess everyone feels pretty much the same. So what can we do about that? So as event professionals, one of the main goals is to make sure that the attendees are satisfied with the learning experience, right? So basically, we need to make sure that as much information is retained as possible. So is there something that you would recommend for the event professionals, event planners to do to solve this problem of the information retention?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And from the top of my head, I can think of 2 remedies to it. First one is a system to enhance the memorization. So it could be a workbook that has really smart questions, or a well-structured worksheet, for example, or some takeaways that aren't only mental takeaways, but also have some physical manifestation. And that is within the event itself, right? So when planning an event, there are plenty of support system for memorizing the new information. Also, the event itself could be designed as an experience, because what we experience is something that we don't forget as much as only if we just hear it or read about it. And after the event, I guess a kind of follow-up could be really useful too. Now we have to be very mindful about follow-up emails and questionnaires, because we don't want to be overbearing, but at the same time, we want to remind the participants of what happened, where could they find additional material, and how can they apply the new takeaways into their daily routine, because this is what events are mainly about, right? Improving daily routines.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot agree more. I mean, it's so important to remember about making sure that we need to apply that into what we learn at the event in the daily routine, and that's how we actually make learning stronger and more efficient.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, that's insight number 2 for you. Okay. And so now I would like to ask you some questions on the behavioral science side.
Sure.
What is the most challenging thing in being a behavioral science professional?
For me, and I think a little bit also for the field, might be very challenging to communicate the additional value that we have as behavioral scientists, because way too often people associate psychologists with just therapy or behavior improvement, and they don't really see where it clicks with event or business or marketing or branding. And quite frankly, as a field, I still think there is so much to do in the communication department, because it is true that this is a new field, that we are still growing, we are still learning how to communicate with the public, but we really need to make some more progress there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so important to kind of let the outside world know how critical this knowledge is and how it can be applied to so many aspects of our professional and personal lives, right? And whenever we have a chance, and I mean, this is what I think one of my goals with this podcast is to get event professionals understand how we can apply this crucial knowledge in events and make events more efficient, more meaningful, more memorable, more engaging. And so I absolutely understand that. So what is your, my other question would be, what is your favorite behavioral concept or a bias maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite tricky to choose only one, but I will try. More recently, I'm really enjoying working with identity. So if we take it as a concept in overarching theory, stemming from all the social identity theory, the dialogical self, the bridging objects, I feel like there are so many opportunities within the business sector to apply the identity framework.
Can you explain what it is about?
Yeah, definitely. So it's about how we relate to the outer world and how we present ourselves, but also the other way around. So how do we incorporate the outer world within ourselves and our self-concept, let's say. I will probably just explain this as an example of, I don't know, if you buy a t-shirt, right? If you want to buy a white t-shirt, there are plenty of options. You can have a bio-cotton t-shirt, just plain regular t-shirt, or a t-shirt with a Tommy Hilfiger sticker. And there are some people who would choose the Tommy Hilfiger sticker, and they are not buying just t-shirt that might be in the same price range as the very high-end bio-cotton shirt, right? So what makes them do this choice? They are not only buying a t-shirt, they are buying a club membership, because there is a group of people who wear these kind of labels, and they want to be associated with that. It is a core identity. It might not be core, but it is an identity part of them that needs to be expressed by a totem brand, a designer clothes, or the plain opposite. There are people who despise this consumerism and would go for labelless shirt because it fits with their personality and what they believe in and their values. And I believe this identity could explain so much about what is going on the market that it's just fascinating. Now, it's definitely not a single concept, like a one-size-fits-all, but it's an interesting lens to work with.
Right. Well, that's really interesting, and I think we can have another whole episode to talk about just about this subject, right? But I know that you actually one of your focus areas right now is the audio visual material, and we're gonna talk about that in a minute. I just wanted to ask you to tell us about what you do, what kind of projects you currently are working on.
So the most recent one happened today. So I'm calling from Brussels, which is not my main headquarters at the moment. And I just had some interesting workshops on branding with my clients, because branding and identity is expression. Just go hand in hand. So branding is something that I'm really passionate about. For the more personal projects, I'm currently developing an automated idea tester that could predict a success of an idea or maybe an event that might be still in concept. So so that is what
that is really
what I
cool.
like to have fun.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's really, really interesting. And so I know that you also worked on the materials for the online event, and that was one of your projects recently, right? Can you explain in more detail what it was about? And actually, my other question would be why you think that event professionals should pay more attention to audio and visual components when they market their events.
Yeah, definitely. So I will try to wrap those two questions into one answer.
Sure.
So the biggest problem that I'm seeing with events recently is that it is way too inconsistent with the branding. And because of that, the companies lose many opportunities, and they lose out on the brand visibility that naturally comes with an event, just because they are not consistent with the branding. And especially with the visual side, it's so important that the event just screams that this was organized by this company, because otherwise the people won't really relate these two separate entities. And this was exactly the case with my recent event that I was appointed for, that I tried to design some experience for, because the clients had already a brand that was fairly recognizable, and they have been working on it for I don't know how many past years, and they achieved some great goals with it. And they first wanted to have this very separate event, and people could not really tell that it was their idea, or that this event was somehow connected. And I mean, you lose out, or you miss out on so many opportunities. But it's such a simple thing to do, just to mind the visuals. Like, okay, people need to connect the event with the company for the branding to take off.
Can you tell me more about your focus of on using audiovisual material, and how do we stimulate the brain using audiovisual material?
Yeah, most definitely. So we, like, every time our brain processes an image or a sound, it is stimulated. So the thing is that our brain is stimulated all the time by these elements, and we really need to choose wisely. What are we going to build in the event? What experience as a whole does it create? And yeah, because we don't really want to be overwhelming, or we don't want to be too messy to be recognized or connected with the company that the event's for. And yeah, I think like this could be the biggest challenge with the audiovisual material, because it is like inconsistency is one issue, but the overwhelming part might be another one.
So we need to kind of find this fine balance between not overwhelming, but then actually using it to achieve the goals that we have.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
And then, yes, that's an interesting dilemma. How do we find that balance? I mean, it depends on the experience of the organizer, or is there anything that we can build on while we are developing the materials, the audiovisual stimuli?
Let me think about that for a minute. I think the base that we can use are some best practices that are commonly used for graphic design, for example. So when we organize an online event, we need to follow some rules on how to make it work for the person who is sitting on the screen, probably has lots of distraction around him. For the in-person events, again, minding the room, for example, the space, working with the stage could also be very helpful. Yeah, and just using the branding.
Do you have any examples from your project, the recent one that we talked about on the online event? What kind of things did you use? Because it was an online event, and I think it would be interesting for many event planners listening or watching this to learn about some specific examples of how you used brain science insights to develop those materials.
So I was really keen on the consistency issue, right?
Right.
And I really wanted this event to be guiding. So I wanted to guide the participants throughout the system and to kind of stir the barriers of the online environment. So everything had to be really intuitive. And of course, we were using an external software for the event. So I only had very limited options. And it all came down to these banners and customizable like photo frames of session details, speaker details, navigation, to really guide the eye, because you can do that with structure, with, for example, hashtags, with different colors, and everything can fall in place even though we had multiple sections for multiple stakeholders, but my aim was to guide every user or every group of users, let's say, the ideal way to what they were looking for. So I really wanted to make it as easy as possible to follow the path that the organizers wanted them to follow.
Right. So making it easy and also be consistent. Those are two great insights that I'm taking from this. And I think, I cannot highlight it enough, being consistent and making it easy, whatever you want people to do. Those are two things that, would be a path to success, I would say. Right. And then, talking about consistency, and I actually have a couple more questions, which I'm asking all the guests on the show. And one is, what, in your opinion, is one behavioral science insight that event professionals should apply immediately, like no question asked?
I would probably say really understanding the recipient of the event. So we are not building the event for ourselves. Quite often, we are not building the event for the paying customer. We are building the event for the end user or the recipient or the participant, however we can call it. But taking the step back to really understand the needs and wishes of the attendees is really important. I feel like it's quite often forgotten that the sponsor is not always the attendee.
Okay, that's great. And what are your top 3 behavioral science books that people from the outside of behavioral science should read?
We have so many books and so many great publications, and I feel like there has been a wave of publications from the first COVID wave.
Yeah.
Because suddenly everyone's sitting at home and thinking what I could do, so they were starting writing a book. But I would actually go for the classic Nudge from Richard Taylor and Cassestine. Plus, also, I've recently stumbled upon this book called The Voltage Effect from John List, which I really enjoyed too.
Actually, yes, it's on my bucket list.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Plus, for the third tip, I recommend maybe something lighter than a book, because I feel like a book can be a pretty huge commitment for an outsider in this field. So I would say just it's really nice to connect with some experts on LinkedIn. For example, Samuel Salter publishes some really good content on LinkedIn. And articles are also nice. We have this medium called the Behavioral Scientist, which I think is really accessible for anyone. And they are really data-driven and just perfect. They have very digestible articles, actually, that are based on very solid research and have some very practical implications.
That's a great point, actually, that you mentioned about smaller mediums like articles and blogs. These days, we've got great opportunity to actually get a lot of useful and helpful information from whatever we are studying, right? And take it from those small size and probably not such time-consuming mediums as blogs and articles on social media. So absolutely, I cannot agree more. And my last question would be, because the video podcast title is "What If I Told You?" Can you please complete the sentence with any just one takeaway from our conversation. So what if I told you?
What if I told you you could max out the experience even before the event starts?
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kamila. That was a pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate everything, like every single insight that you shared with us today. I encourage everyone to check Kamila's website and connect on LinkedIn, and all the links will be in the show notes. Thank you for listening and or watching, and this is the Event Psychology Podcast, What If I Told You? And for more brain science insights and for this episode recap, please join the Event Psychology Club. Until next time, bye-bye.